Hi everyone, welcome back to Gear Media Tech Live, part of the Pixel Core Live series. And tonight we're going to be talking live about lighting and sound. And we're going to start off, of course, we have Brent Bye back.
Hello.
Brent, the master behind Twit and many other lighting masterpieces. And,
good to be here, not on the other side of the space like always.
Well, and for a lot of you who are tuning in for the first time, one of the things is that most of what our guys get trained in camera and lighting all came from, camera work and lighting all comes from.
I got thrown in the fire, is what it was.
Yeah, exactly.
From you.
Yeah.
And then the Twit fire from you.
Right.
So yeah, now we're going to pass the knowledge on.
Yes, that's exactly the intention. So tonight what we're going to do is we're going to start. Now you can go, you'll see if you're watching the live stream, you're going to see a place that where you can give us questions. It's on this side or on this side. I can't remember which side I'm on. But you want to go ahead and click through there. And then you can ask questions and vote the questions up and down. So if you like the questions that are being asked, you can vote on them. If you don't like the questions that are being asked, you can vote them down. And then what I'm going to be doing is asking some of these questions of Brent while he's working, and then vice versa, or I'll still look at them probably. But
the system is cool. This is the one we used in San Diego, right?
Yes.
For the Seafood Association.
Yes, the International Seafood.
And it's really interesting to have that. It's kind of like the dig phenomenon.
Yeah, it's like dig for questions on during
likes and dislikes up and down.
Exactly. So
they loved it, right?
And we've used it for the last two live streams, and it's gone swimmingly well. So
really
we are.
Cool. So we're looking forward to getting them voted up and down.
Yeah. So go ahead and tune in and
let's cause some questions then, huh?
Exactly. So what we're going to talk about today? Where are we starting?
We're going to start by universalizing the conversation of color, kind of carry over from what we did a couple weeks ago.
Right.
We talked about, we were all over the place. We're talking about for hours, literally.
It started off as a 3-hour cruise.
Yeah, it was.
Exactly.
And so I thought that we're sitting at a round table.
Mm-hmm.
We just got done lighting an entire, I don't know how many thousand square feet studio for Leo over there.
Easier.
For Twit. But it might be interesting to say some of those decisions that went in over there to light a round table set in a darkened environment because we had to just completely recreate all the lights. So taking the conversation from the color temperature in the camera, how it relates to people sitting in front of that camera.
And then what are you going to do next?
And let's augment the light slightly. So this is the evolution of right now. And again, I brought some meters to prove what we're looking at. Before we had a single source above us.
Right.
That was one of those giant swirly bulbs that had a little bit of a green shift. It wasn't a true Kino bulb, but everything right now is true Kino, and we're getting on our color meter, I got 6100 Kelvin there, I've got 6080 there, and then from the back, so we're coming in at a pretty solid average of 6100 Kelvin, zero green shift, Kino bulbs all the way around, right? We have one color temperature here.
Right.
That's it. So we showed that spectrum last week, the color wheel, and that would mean that right now the cameras are set at a white point. Anything that's white, the back of this card, the white corners on here.
And by the way, these are great little cards.
Yeah.
To have laying around.
Absolutely.
These are the simplest version of these cards. There's many chip charts that you can get.
Yeah.
But as a minimum, these are great because you have your gray and your white and black, and especially if you're looking at a scope, you can get a good sense of what you're most exposed and least exposed.
Well, this is the ideal situation for something like the Final Cut Pro 3-way color corrector.
Right.
It's called 3-way because you want to color correct for the whites, the midtones, and the darks.
Right.
So if you had something off in here, say the cameras were set to 32 Kelvin,
right.
We shot this scene, we would look extremely wrong. We'd look really, really orange, right?
Right.
And
I like to think of it as warm.
Yeah, we would look like Oompa Loompas is what we would look like. It would be. So what you would actually be able to do is go into Final Cut Pro and you could load the 3-way color corrector. You could click on the eyedropper for the whites, and then you'd click on this card. All you had to do was get this thing to go bam, one frame, and that's it.
And we do a lot, and when we're doing a lot of shooting, a lot of times we're throwing that up there to get that base correction.
Yeah.
Sometimes we stick it underneath. Sometimes we'll stick it right underneath the slate, so you can just see a little bit of it, or a little over it, or whatever.
And that's a lot of those slates that actually have the clapper and the color scale. They always include the medium gray. This is the 18% gray. This is a black point and a white point, right?
We really want to talk about 18% gray and whether it's.
Well, we could. We'll do the do the PC version of 18% gray, is meant to be the average Caucasian person.
Right.
The skin tone, the reflectivity, completely disregarding all the people of ethnicity around the world, which is not fair. But that's where this all started in the
And everything,
30s.
And the system's all kind of built
Yeah,
around.
exactly. Everything's built around 18% gray because of the average reflectivity of Caucasian skin. So we're stuck with it. It's a good average. It does a job for most people. So the reason why this card is here right now is because we're trying to universalize this conversation. The cameras are at I believe, 48 Kelvin. 48 Kelvin, everyone is verifying. The reason for that is right now we look a little bit warmer on camera, but what we want to do is we want to start mixing some color temperature. So if we is anybody available right now to switch into a color profile? How about on the single there, can we go to exactly what we're looking at right now I'm getting, as a key, 6100 Kelvin. And if we're prepared to flip that dial, we'll see what white for white looks like on, and we can go live on that camera, yeah. So when we get there, you're at 6100 Kelvin right now. So that's a good warm tone. I don't know, for you looking at me in the room, would you say that my skin tone looks appropriate for that? So
yeah,
that's a 1-to-1 kind of ratio of a white point. So that's the equivalent of putting a white card in frame, zooming your camera in on it, and just white balancing to whatever. It's like we're outside right now.
But the challenge is if all you do is do the white balance. If you just throw a white, a lot of people will do that. But the problem is if you have to do multi-camera like this, the challenge you get into is that they're all a little different depending on where they reflect it or how it looks. We find that by itself is oftentimes not enough.
Yeah, there's finessing you have to do, and that's part of just multiple cameras. It's going to happen. All the time. And that's why there are time-based correctors downstream, multicam, and satellite trucks and all that stuff. There's somebody doing that because there's always something wrong with a 3-camera show. We got 30 cameras next door, and we're just kind of like, well,
It'll be close.
Now, one of the fun tricks is why we're going to do everything right here, right now, is to say, let's split the average color temperature. Let's play with the key lights so that more cameras could have more of some wiggle room. So it's great that you just mentioned that because across the 3 cameras that we have right now, there could be a slight fluctuation, even right now as you cut through the cameras. One camera might just look a little bit off. So if we go back to your white point of 48, then we can start the conversation of, this is just what I had planned at TWIT, was to say, let's split the color temperature. Let's not go full 32. Let's not go full 56. 56 for daylight coming in, because there's daylight coming in from outside.
So we're going to let daylight be a little cool.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so the idea is when you sit with MacBreak Weekly or when you sit on TWIT, when you're sitting at that round table set and a camera sees to the outside, the decision was we want human beings to look warm, and I wanted to design white edge lights, backlights, and then everything behind that you would see would be full color ranges on the TWIT wall, but outside to be blue.
And that tells the viewer that that's outside.
It does, yeah. And it's an aesthetic taste thing too. It's in a technology environment, and we talked about it before, it's if you want a human to look warm, and having the white point from behind is really about the monitors that they review from oftentimes. There's an iPad or there's a screen that they'll shoot over. And the white point of those screens is basically just 55, 56 Kelvin. So it's a little bit off on the precise, but the trade-off is that warm human, white backlight, it's not 32K on the screen, so everything looks crazy whacked out colors. They look pretty much true. And then the background is a contrast where you have a warm person against a bluish background, just complementary colors. So that was the basic idea. And the decision to switch the cameras to the point of a color temperature that split that average was the number one thing, right? So as we sit here, we're in all full daylight, right? And the color temperatures, that's why we look a little bit more white point on these cameras, because we've shifted the color temperature. As we saw when we shifted that camera to what we were getting, the flesh tones look different. So we've kind of milked it out here. So we blued it out.
And all these bulbs here are 56K.
Yeah, everything in here, they're 56, but they're really pumping out a little bit cooler temperature of 61, which is verified here, right? So the other thing we need to verify is the rating, the ASA rating, as if you put in a piece of film strip into a film camera. There's an ASA rating of 400 speed film, 200 speed film, and there's an equivalent to that in video cameras. And it's arguable, but these cameras, EX1 and EX3s from Sony, are arguably rated anywhere from 320 to 800 ASA.
Depending on who you talk to.
Yeah, exactly. So we're just kind of considering them 320.
Now, how do you rate that? When someone says it's 320 ASA, what does that mean?
That means the chip itself has a certain sensitivity as the light comes through the elements, and the camera itself and the chip kind of equate in a scale of sensitivity.
So in some ways, that like if you have it set to that ISO, like so let's say if a camera has that or whatever, that's its base ISO, and anything below that is being pushed down, and anything above that's being gained up.
Well, when you shoot on, say, a Canon 7 or 5D, you can shift your ASA rating in order to help you with depth of field a lot of times.
Right.
We were just shooting.
But it does have a base of what the chip is actually working at.
Yeah, and that's the thing is with a lot of video cameras, you don't have that adjustment. That's really a DSLR thing.
Right.
So you have an ASA rating because it's essentially a replacement of a stills camera that was meant to have film loaded into it. So there's the ASA, there's your aperture, and there's shutter speed as well.
Right.
In a video camera, generally you're just dealing with the ASA or the shutter speed and the aperture only.
And gain.
The ASA is kind of like the gain. It's linked to that because it's sensitivity of the chip and the
Because
gain.
at zero, that's kind of like
Yeah.
zero. You could say that zero is the.
Yeah, so that's what we
It's
have
kind of
here right
basic.
now is we're looking at zero gain on these cameras, and we're just going to call them 320, which is a conservative average for these, you know, popular opinion to these particular cameras.
Right.
So that's what I've plugged into this particular meter.
Right.
And this is an incidence meter and a spot meter all in one. This is my other meter. We had the color meter before.
That was a very
from
expensive
Sakana.
show for me, by the way.
Yeah, it was. This one's cheaper. This is, you know, I actually got this one off of Amazon for used, brand new. It's all good to go.
How much?
It's a lucky one. Used, it was $450. Brand new, they're like $8 bucks,
I can't
100.
do it.
That
Can't
is.
do it.
All right, well you don't have to. You've
I'm
been
just gonna
slamming
promise
it for so long.
Yeah, Brent,
Now,
Brent, you did it.
I pushed him. So
By the way,
gray
just,
card.
just as a reminder,
Yeah.
as we go through this, we haven't gotten any questions yet, but I think they're going to be starting to come rolling in. But we
Yeah.
want to make sure you
Yeah.
know if you've got questions about. We're covering a lot of distance here. So if you have a question, make sure during this live feed that you are able to go over and open up the question area. Log in. You can just, it's just any kind of email structure. If you can't remember what it was last time, don't worry about it. Just any email structure that will work. And then go ahead and vote or ask questions. But if you've got a question, that's the place to ask. And you can do it live, and I'm going to ask him the questions as they roll in. So it's a good time to get in early.
Because I'm going to start running around
He is.
pretty soon. Actually, I'm going to start right now. This gray card is going to represent the average reflectivity of average person.
Right.
Right? And we've decided the cameras are going to be rated at 320 sensitivity of the chips, right? So the meter is plugged in for the same right now. And I'm going to take a meter reading right in front of this gray card, and I'm going to find that a 2 9/10, if I wiggle that around a little bit, it's pretty much an F2 and 9/10. I can also, this particular meter, you can take the round disc and slide it in to equate as if you had
Pretty snazzy.
if you had a flat disc, which a lot of DPs prefer. This actually averages out the exposure of a human face. It mimics the nose of a person. That's the reason for it. Somebody actually won an Academy Award for that design.
And then
It
everyone
was
pushes
genius,
it back
you know?
in.
Because if you have shadows coming in, it actually
Right.
averages the shadow of the bottom of the bulb, they call it. But
Right.
when you suck the bulb inside there, it's as if you had one light source only, right?
Right.
So from one single light source, I'm getting 2.8, almost straight up. And this plane is about the same as our faces right here. So the cameras, I believe, are set at 2.8 right now. So we should be feeling, well, let's go to a 2.8.
Let's see what a 2.8 looks
I think
like.
maybe we only set the center, the two shot. Yeah, so let's go ahead and close down. We probably look a little hot right now, which I haven't really been looking at the monitor.
Well, this monitor's not accurate
Once
either.
everybody's universalized to a 2.8, everybody's there? All right.
Let's go ahead and cut around. You know,
Yeah.
the thing is, the monitor we're looking at is not a color-corrected monitor.
Well,
These monitors run a little hot.
This is just to universalize the conversation that
Actually, this looks better.
We're using a light meter. Yeah, there's
this will look better because we had a problem with one of our previous ones being
Right.
a little dull because we weren't
Yeah.
using. Now we have a question: are light meters required, or can you get by without?
negative. Light meters are not required. Light meters are really only right now for us to universalize this conversation and make sure there's no fibbing or lying going on. It's to keep me completely honest on color temperatures and the theory of when you start to mix light. You do not need to have these meters. You can take your camera and you can zoom it into a gray card or an equivalent, and you can use scopes,
Right.
histogram. You can use vector scopes. You can use all kinds of different scopes.
Well, and by the way, if we're talking about scopes, the Conduit, which is our product, has scopes built into it. There's also a great one that is Scope Box, which is actually what we're going to use. Even though we write one that it's a big compositor, though I don't want a big compositor like it as my scopes. Scope Box on the Mac is fantastic, and that's what we're going to actually use in our studio.
Right.
And then we have there's I think it's Ultra Scopes that's made by Blackmagic, which is a little piece of hardware that you hook into your. But it's all PC.
Well,
it's a little bit of a bummer.
I mean,
but
Adobe
anyway,
doesn't Adobe package some of the
and
scopes?
that's what I was going to say. And on location from Adobe, which I think comes with all the Adobe packages. So if you're taking advantage of that big Adobe package that's there, you can also get that built in. And so it just depends on what you want to do. There's a lot of. I mean, before it used to be that you only could use a hardware scopes, and it was really expensive and everything else, and we've used them. And the reality is, you're getting the same. You're getting a digital signal. It's not even analog, so there's not a lot to be questioning. I mean, it's just that's what it is, you know. And so,
and the idea of a meter is to get you within the range and keep you from having your whites overexposed. That's why zebra bars are there. It's the zebra bars function on a camera is essentially if you turn it on. We wouldn't be able to show the audience right now, but they even have a sliding scale. You can get, at 80% IRE, you can get the zebra to show up, or only conservatively if it's 70, or where maybe you let things blow out and you'll set those at 90 or 100%. You'll just be like, I don't care, it's fine, zebras are okay.
Oftentimes I'll set mine at 90.
Yeah.
And a lot of cameras, like I think these EXs have two.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'll set mine to 70 and 90, and so I just kind of know when I'm going through that range.
And it's totally subjective. There's no absolute correct method to any of that stuff. The only reason I'm holding light meters in my hand is just to keep this conversation universal so that we can all have a launching point to discuss from. It's like, well, yes, the camera, they were rating it at 320, and we rated the meter at 320, and we exposed the gray card. I can also switch here, and there's a slight difference between reading a gray card incidentally and reflectively. So I have a spot meter in here as well, and I'm switching to spot meter mode. I'm going to move, and I'm going to get into this same light, and I'm going to find the gray, and I'm getting a 2/8 and a third. So I've got a third of a stop difference between the reflectivity and the incidence reading, and the incidence reading between full bulb.
And this is saying it should be darker or it should be brighter?
These are the variances.
What is it saying? Is there a little voice in there that's saying?
No, these are all those subjective things where certain directors of photography always prefer to go from the bulb because they can average out the lights and get an exposure, and it's safer. If you're just under the gun, you got to imagine that when you're under the gun being paid to do something, the more tools you have and the more latitude you have. That's why certain people choose an Alexa camera over a Red camera in a professional environment, because they have more range of latitude that they can futz with if they're going to shoot outside and it's a really bright sun.
Well, and one of the things that people forget is they're like, oh, why can't they just get it right? Well, the thing is that there are multiple cameras and there's multiple pieces and there's people going in and out and it's a moving shot, and most importantly, there's 100 people sitting on set that are burning X amount of dollars. I mean, you might. If you think about that, you can be running oftentimes at as much as $5,000 or $10,000 an hour, which is going to get you to.
It goes way.
Oh, it goes way over that. No, I'm being conservative, but I mean when you're looking at one of these things, so let's say you're burning $6,000 an hour. That's $100 a minute. Yeah. That you're churning through, and this is something I think is important for people to get, is that at $100 a minute. Yeah. You're sitting out there. If it takes you 3 more minutes to figure out where the lights needed to be,
exactly.
You're now that was $300.
Yeah, exactly.
Out into nowhere.
And that's why you see crews and film crews, everyone's standing around. The reason for that, and it is an efficient system, is that every person who's standing around is being paid to be really good at that job at the moment that they're needed, so that it happens as quickly and efficiently as possible. And that's yet another reason for using light meters, is when you have multiple light sources, you have multiple people on a crew, It's not the job of somebody, a director of photography, who normally sits just behind a camera, who's thinking about exposures, and that's it. There's usually a gaffer, chief lighting technician, somebody running around with a meter, monkey with a meter we call them, and they're running around, and they have a rapport with the director of photography, of course, but there's a crew who is doing that. And even on the smallest project, you can really start to think this way, and you should.
Right.
Somebody should be responsible for the look, and they should be able to just sit and focus on the composition, and they should think about certain things and not be overwhelmed with everything, because you become less efficient when you're trying to do everything as one person. Right. So to remove some of the bottleneck, a meter is helpful when you're taking multiple readings from multiple sources, and then all of a sudden, especially in a single camera shoot, which is very often in narrative and music videos, if you're spending $10,000 a day for a camera package, you're probably going to get one. You know, you're not going to have a 3-camera setup. So yet another reason to have somebody else do the lighting for you, run around and worry about that stuff, so that when you're shooting the single camera over the shoulder this way, when you need to turn around and get the overs from the other side, you universalize the lighting and the ratios, which is what a meter does, is you know that your key is at a 2.8, and then your backlights are 1 stop over or 1.5 or 2, because that's the look they like.
Right. And to be fair, you know, I have been known as someone who attacks the meter.
Yeah.
I don't attack it using it on set
right.
as a general measurement tool.
Yeah. For green screen?
For green screen is when I attack it. Like, let's not measure the green screen that way. There are better ways to do that. Stay away from that.
Yeah.
As a tool, the big thing is that scopes require whatever you're going through the camera. You can't point the scope. Well, I guess you could, but you can't really point the scopes at everything you're looking at. So a meter gives you that opportunity to kind of make sure that you're able to test certain areas and run around, do exactly what we're doing, run around and make those adjustments.
It can still be useful. Doing a job for, I believe it was for a Pixel Corp production. Your brother Joe and I were doing a Salesforce job. We did a green screen job in Los Angeles. He flew down, and we did the meter settings based off the camera and the scopes for the green screen. And then a meter can be useful for universalizing the lighting setup for the individual.
No,
as well.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So mine is basically the old-fashioned way to measure a green screen is with a meter. Right. And I'm saying meter works everywhere in the set except for the green screen, which you really want scopes for. Yeah. And so there was one of the questions here is, can we talk about scopes? And we are going to talk about scopes, but we're not going to talk about them tonight. But we will make that part of the Gear Media Tech. So Carolyn, who's watching right now, let's write that down. So one of the probably September, October when we do Gear Media Tech, we will talk about scopes. We'll dig into scopes. Right. I might even bring a person in that really digs into scopes, and we'll do that. And then a couple other questions. Is outside lighting typically less controllable than indoors?
Is outside, absolutely. Yeah. Outside lighting, the sun moves constantly. The sun is generally placed behind the subjects, like we've got right now. Right now we have kind of a key to fill ratio, which is hotter on the key side. So generally outside, you're going to flip that. You're going to put the sun behind people. You're going to put the cloud source. You're going to put the larger source behind, just so it wraps around. It's a more pleasing look for pretty much everybody. Right. And it also allows you to control the fill coming back when the sun bounces into things. So outside is
a lot of times you're controlling the sun, so you have these massive silks and everything else
all the time.
I mean, to kind of slow that down.
Yeah, you can't do anything over a period of time, because doing anything narrative takes a while, or doing anything with any period of time more than even 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. The sun moves a lot faster than you'd think in 15 minutes, and you're trying to avoid the big noon time of the day, which is really a lot of times is 10 o'clock till 4 p.m. in a summer evening or something.
I think I read somewhere that I think it was not positive. I think Three Kings was shot all
magic hour.
All magic hour.
Yeah, there's a couple movies. Yeah, there's been a few throughout. It's a really
relaxing day in some ways, and really stressful for exactly. An hour. Well,
you're up
2 hours.
At 4 a.m. because the sunrise. You get all those shots, and then you shoot for a few hours, and it's true, because it's when the sun is high in the sky, it just. Everybody, when the sun starts going down, things just look beautiful. Yeah. Or when the sun's coming up, you get the low position and angle of light. So we always want to mimic that at all times. And we probably want to get to that. So the idea here that we're sitting in right now is that the key lights right now are very high, and they're just completely open and smashing everywhere. And the backlights, we just got a little bit to edge us out. Mm-hmm. And what we want to do, as we discussed, was recreate if I was going to do a Twit Roundtable with 2 persons, just here really quickly, then I would like to use cross key, which you would get your own key light, I will get my own key light. We could do with the light panels that are already rigged up high. You basically have 2 backlights that we're going to use as our backlights. I would, well, now that I see them, I would almost prefer that we had moved them a little bit. They'll be great to start. So what we're going to do is, the reason why we universalized our conversation with the meters was to get back to this exposure without changing the exposure. We'll just affect the lighting and leave the cameras at a 2.8 that we have them set at, right? So what we're going to start with is the key lights. And the key lights are going to be these divas.
So while he's moving that, once again, we're not going to talk about scopes. There was a question about, can you explain how accurately to read the scopes? Again, we're going to do a whole Gear Media Tech on scopes. So that's coming up, so stay tuned for that next month or the month after. And then color matching different cameras. Can you comment on calibrating color for using different camera models so that they can be edited, the edited footage can... Now, I would say that is the one time, if I'm using different brands, different models, where a lot of times I'm going to say uncle, and the first thing I'm going to do is just try to white balance them. And then I'm going to go in, the way I tend to do it is I get them white balanced.
Right.
You can tell me what you think of this, but we'll white balance them at that point, because the problem is that Canon, Sony, all these companies, they handle what they say is 32 or 56 isn't necessarily all the same.
Yeah.
And so if you start mixing and matching cameras, you start mixing and matching where their white points are.
Yeah,
and so that's when you really have to get into a thing where we're going to white balance them. Then you have to look at them, and what we do a lot is whatever we're using to do the live mix, because a lot of times we're doing live mixes, we will we'll take our little bar and just slide it halfway, either vertical or horizontal.
Yeah, like you're doing a preview post, and you're just
so we do
color matching.
1 and 2, and then we sit there and look at them usually with chip charts.
Yeah.
And then definitely with people to make sure. And then we decide which one is going to be our master one, and we keep on looking at each one against that and just tuning it. And now we have the advantage of, with little consumer cameras, it's very hard to do that, because you're going to call it out, and you're going to kind of slowly move the color temperature. With anything like EX3 or above, one of the things that you're going to have is you can get this little remote. I think they're called RMP. I think they're RMP 150s or RMS 150s.
The 150s you were telling me about, that's all I ever heard was
they're a little
150.
box, and they hook into your EX3, and all the Cine Altas above the EX3, not the X1, but everything above it. You can sit there and remote shade them, so you can change all the white colors and everything else from where you're sitting, and which is great because you're sitting there looking at a color-corrected monitor, making adjustments. So now, that answers that question as much as we're going to be able to answer it right now. But so what are you doing?
I am setting these key lights. The reason why I would prefer to make these horizontal, the reason I'm making these vertical right now, this one has a loose locking ball. The reason why I'm doing these vertical is so I have the side doors, so I can block this light from hitting you as much as possible. If this will stay. Oh, it's not going to want to stay.
I think you just have to push the little button in there.
No, it's the actual ball needs some tightening.
Oh, the actual. Oh.
Yeah, the actual ball mount is slipping, but I think we got it there now. And then on this one, so the decision on Twit, like we discussed, was warm keys and a different color cooler back. So what I did ahead of time,
planned ahead.
Yeah, and now I broke them already. Really great. Is we just did some half orange gel. Last time we talked about, I showed you the little leaf filter sample pack. This is one of the full rolls.
This is a CTO.
This is half CTO. Color temperature orange. That's a full-size 4-foot roll. And we use these all the time just to warm the color temperature of any light source that is.
Show that to the camera before you put it up there.
Now this is, I have something white, you can put it behind. It's not a party orange. This isn't meant to be like, oh, this is a really cool orange color. This specifically will shift. When we talked before about the color temperature scale as it went from 55 Kelvin up to across. We showed the color wheel before, and we talked about how the white point will shift.
Right.
This This is specifically designed to only shift the color temperature of the light emitting from the source. So,
Right.
you know, this is how you get this meter to start reading. Right now, this Kino is getting about 6,300, even a little cooler than what we were getting from our keys before. So I'm going to put this gel in front of the Diva light after I remove this grate. And that is going to be...
So can you pull that out one time so people can see it while it's on, while the camera's on me?
Pull it out here?
No. Point it towards me and then just take it out so people can see
here.
that.
1 second.
So you can see it.
Now this is with the 48 Kelvin, right? And this is with no gel. And now we're applying the gel, and there's a little bit of warmth to our human being, right? Mm-hmm. We're not changing the color temperature settings. All we've done is we've warmed the key light that's hitting you, right? So effectively, you're kind of halfway there because you're getting a little bit of backlight, but I don't like the quality of the backlight so much. It's a little... Now I'm going to take down the intensity a touch by putting in this controller of the light. And I'm also going to go vertical on this source so we can try and cut it off of myself, same as the other side. And Divas are always tough to tilt. I actually don't prefer to do this with stands, but I just prefer not to do this with a stand because there's more of a tendency for people to hit it. But that's what we're stuck with by going vertical with the Diva. So what we have here, I'm using these doors and I'm trying to block it off of myself where I would be sitting. And as I sit back down in here, it's still getting a little bit of a spill on me, but if I come around, it's not fully keying me. And if we went to a 2-shot, you should be lit very well in a warm pool of light, and I'm down, right? So what we're going to do from here is do the other key source. And we're getting a little bit of bleed from the top, too. We're going to go really orange here in a second, and we're going to actually have to shift our... We're probably going to have to shift our color temperature. But these are the things that you kind of just do by eye. And on the backlights, we just want to kind of get them hotter than the key lights, which is why they're close. So there's a key and a key. It's dimmed. There we go. All right. So I believe those are dimmed all the way up. They actually take a little bit to come up full speed, but the dimmers are... That's all the way up on you. Now, Kevin, if you would be so kind as to turn off our Kino Flow keys up top. And we're going to go back to our darker mode of your Charlie Rose type thing. But at least right now, as I can float into your key light and look at... Each of us kind of have our own. And really, I need to universalize the spacing of that. And this is where, Kevin, if you don't mind adjusting one of these lights as well. I'll give Alex a reading. Oh. And blocking out his other key light. There we go. We're like a solid 2-8 to the light. We didn't have to really change our exposure on the camera. So I'm going to go for the same for myself. I'm going to block out. Kevin, if you can walk in a little bit. It's just not up to speed yet. We need to wait till that one comes to full intensity. But you could pan a little bit to lamp left. And if you would imagine, it looks like you want to come forward a little bit to match the distance of that stand. There you go. Maybe back off a touch, split the difference. And then as it comes up to speed from that light, we're probably going to get, in a few minutes, we'll be back up to a 2.8 because we're about a third shy. So again, the meter is just helping me work for somebody who's on a camera.
Well, and the challenge here is that we're looking at these uncalibrated monitors, and they look a little bit bright.
Yeah.
And so this is where scopes come in. It's really nice because scopes tell us what we're actually getting across the entire image. Yeah. So we're making some guesses here.
Right.
I think, but see, if I look over at the big projector there, it looks pretty good as far as exposure goes.
Well, no, they're way hot right now, and they're way too orange. And
it's too hot and too orange, even in the back. Take a look at the.
Yeah. So we're in a work in progress.
In the back. In the stream.
And what we're going to do is, this is going to be more moody, and as we get our average across here, we're already way up above there. So what we're going to do, Kevin, if you could dial down, the dimmer on that one. Let's just dial it back. Now that they're up full speed, they're way hot. So start dialing back, keep going back. Dimming, dimming, dimming. Let's just keep going. Oh, hold that. Up a teeny touch. There you go. Great, so that's about a 2.8. Let's do that over here as well. Let's come on down. Oh, back up a touch. Back up, back up. And a little bit more. Great. So we're back to a 2.8 and the exposure should be better. We'll have to change things. See, as I come into your key and I get hit,
Right.
that's why we wanted to control so each light has its own source. So if you're getting hit by your own, this is why we would move this light in a little bit. But obviously I get too much of it when I'm in here.
Right.
So that's the grip department, and that's when you would want to control this lighting. But in a perfect world, we would have these higher, we would have them horizontal, we'd have a little bit more control over them. But we would also, Kevin, also if we had the step stool to do our backlights.
So while you're doing that, question, can you accurately match a DSLR such as a 7D with a CCD or CMOS-based camera? Well, DSLR is a CMOS camera, that by nature. But I think the real question is like a 7D to an EX1, that type of thing.
Can you match a DSLR to a...
To like a EX1.
Yeah, it's just you can match the colors. It's just a constant...
The settings just may not be the same. You're not gonna set them at a certain f-stop and get them. You're gonna have to really pay attention to where they're all going.
Yeah, and the quality of the imagery is so drastically different
Right.
when you're mixing a DSLR because of the image size. We discussed doing that to limit some depth of field, even on the twit sets, and it just becomes such a drastic difference in quality.
Yeah.
And there's an inherent down res when you use a large imager.
Mm-hmm.
And you scale it down. You'd think, oh, I'm only going to display this at 1080 or something. Why am I going to shoot 4K? There really is this discernible quality of large high resolution. When it gets downscaled, it inherently just keeps a little bit of a lot of the details, even though they're being scaled down to the same size. So you might shoot with a 1080 camera, and then you'd shoot the same shot right next to it with, say, a 4K camera, and you scale down the 4K down to 1080, and you will get this inherent quality. It's a really subjective thing, but personally, I can absolutely see the details. So that's the tough thing in matching. But for colors, yeah, you can. It's just like trying to color time a shot or in post or something like that. You can tune the colors. You can use a color corrector scale or something like that to match two cameras color-wise. Mm-hmm. And the best way to do that is to shoot the same charts. Right. And then use the camera settings and A/B, have a switcher that can wipe, or just keep flipping back and forth, or have screen grabs on even in Photoshop. And
there's some of the scopes and some tools that will let you take a grab. Yeah. And then look at it and then do another one.
Yeah. And it's a laborious process to do.
And to do it well, I mean, it takes us. We budget, on a 3-camera shoot, to put it in perspective, we budget a good hour. Yeah. That it's going to take us to get all those cameras synced. They're 90% there like that. Yeah. And then it's just a matter of that last little bit is the thing that we have to kind of pay attention to. Right. How long will the gels hold up under heat? Do they need to be changed often?
These gels, not a problem on Kino flows.
Yeah, they're going to last forever.
Kino flows don't get hot. With light panels, not a problem at all. It's never going to be a problem with anything LED, generally with fluorescent based. The challenge you get with fluorescents, say you take a 55K Kino flow tube and you wrap them with an additional gel. It seems weird because they have this protective sleeve on it, and I used to naysay about this until I actually talked to Kino and see it in practice. They make specific bulbs that are called, I believe, the 900 series, that are meant for, if you put gels inside a Kino and it's pointing straight down, there's not a lot of heat escape in a lot of the designs of the lights. So when you put any diffusion gel or color gel on a Kino tube and wrap it tight, that heat actually holds in the Kino tubes. It heats them up and they start to go green spike. They have a shift, which is that other shift on the color meter we were telling you about. So for really high-end film projects, if you're doing compositing and you don't want to have green shift, or you need to have perfect color, or if you're just that detail-oriented, yeah, you can't wrap Kinos. Or
You're not talking about wrapping the entire Kino or putting it in front. You're talking about wrapping the bulbs.
No,
You're
it's
talking about put it right in
yeah,
front.
just putting it right on the
on the
doors.
front.
Yeah,
That'll be enough to handle the even out on those doors.
Yeah, it seems really weird because they're warm to the touch and the ends get hot to the touch, but there actually is a noticeable green shift on a color meter when you wrap, say, a 4x4 and you just put gel, you clip it to the reflector over the tubes. A lot of people will pull out of 4 tubes, they'll pull 2, the outer ones, wrap a gel around them and put it back in, and that causes a heat up and causes a green shift, which is noticeable on a meter. We look really orange right now. Well, let's convert that a touch. We knew that was going to happen to a point, so
I have spent a lot of time in the sun today.
yeah. These are, we've dropped a couple thousand degrees, and we didn't want to go that far. We went to 4,000, and on this side we went to 4,000. These are different lights than we used on Twit. I used the same types of bulbs, but a different output. We didn't use Divas, we used the parabeams. And the daylight balance of these, depending on the age of the bulbs, all that kind of stuff. We're actually about 400 degrees cooler on the Twit set, so what we want to do is we want to change the color temperature of the cameras to reflect that. We said, what were we at, 48 right now? 48. Yeah, so we could drop that, and we could see how that goes. Why don't we go like 400 degrees? Let's go to 44 and see.
So while they're making that adjustment, what camera in the $1,500 to $3,000 range would you recommend for professional projects right now?
In the 1,500
to 3,000.
After using these Canon cameras on the Twit set and with the HV 20, 30, 40 updates, all those things, those have been really interesting to me. I haven't with the DSLR stuff, it's a really, really different worlds, and really that's the question, is what are you going to use them for? In a standard run and gun world where you actually need to record audio, when you need to have some control over focus and have your small screen, if you're in a run and gun and audio is important, you're documenting things, a DSLR is really difficult.
Yeah.
You got to be talented. I was hunting focus on a job with.
And you'll see it. I just posted. I actually just posted on YouTube. If you go to Alex Lindsay PXC, or if you just search, I think for Tom's Margarita machine or Margarita mix.
Right.
I put up Tom Anderson made this crazy Margarita machine, and it was the first day I had my 5D.
Right.
And I decided I'm just going to go handheld with the 50 like wide open. and so you'll see a lot of me just going woo woo. I think I did pretty well. You got to remember I had it out for 45 minutes, but it was still like you'll see me going. Oh,
it is not easy.
It's
a whole different, but it dictates this new shooting style.
Yeah.
And that's why I would ask.
And there's something very organic about it, even though I wasn't on all the time. There's something that I like about that. I have to say that for me, I think that the one just above, so there is a camera that is the same camera as what Leo got. So the G10s is what he has, right?
Yeah.
There's the AX10 or XA10.
Yeah.
And the XA10 is the G10. Whole body's the same.
Really?
Except that it's got a handle on the top and it's got XLR ins.
Right.
So
the
it's
adapter for the same as the JVC.
As far as I know, that there's nothing else different about it.
Yeah.
Now it's running about, I think the street price is $2,500 or whatever. If I'm looking in that range, you're not going to get a full body camera that's going to do the job at below 3,000. So you're looking at a miniature camera that's going to shoot you a great image. Now what I will say is those G10s do a great job on the image. I mean the image is great. What you give up in those consumer cameras is control.
Right.
So being able to have everything exterior with these EX1s that you're looking at here, you can just grab onto stuff and make changes and be precise and do a lot of things that you can't do with those little cameras, but you don't need that over there.
Well, the key to those little cameras, and somebody asking to recommend a camera, and the big things are that these cameras that we're talking about and the ones that were chosen for the Twit set is the chip itself is a 1-to-1 ratio. It's an actual 1920 by 1080 pixel ratio chip.
And it's also, I believe, 1/3 or
They're third
1
inch.
over 2.6, which is a little bigger than 1/3.
Yeah, a little bit.
Inch chip.
Yeah.
And those chips, we put those up against charts, and they really hold their own. I mean,
do.
they are
They
very,
do.
very
They're
sharp
really
chips.
nice, yeah.
I really believe the Canons are the best in that
Yeah.
field.
And from comparing to like a Panasonic HVX 200 with 1/4-inch chips,
Right.
considerably smaller, it's a really big difference. But it's a different quality, but at the same time there was some scaling going on with the video codecs that they chose to
If
use.
you take this little one and you put it up against an HVX 200,
Yeah.
these little Canon cameras look much sharper.
They're pretty
know,
impressive. They really are.
Yeah. Now, if you go a little over that 3,000, now you're in like the FX 100, the AF 100. In that $44,000 to $5,000
Right.
range. That gets into a real video camera with a real short depth of field and a real pretty look. But it is going to double your cost. So you have to decide how professional, how much you're going to do to make that work.
And those are really the decisions. The first things is the video codec that you're recording to the chips natively in the camera, which is most people are going to be doing that. Is it a native 1920 1080 chip? It's like we can throw out the SD conversations, like we don't even consider shooting 4x3 or any of that stuff. So no HDV codecs I would recommend, just straight up. Is it going to a ProRes or is it going to some type of codec that's an H.264 base?
And what you want to know is also what is it doing raw, because it may be doing something horrible to the internal components. But what you'll learn to do eventually is, like, we capture everything we capture off our camera. We rarely use anything that we're capturing directly off these cameras. Generally, what we're using is Key Pro. I mean, that tends to be our capture device.
Well, every 30 of the cameras over there for Twit they're all coming off the HDMI. They're going to Blackmagic converter box to HD SDI.
And it's uncompressed 422. I mean, that is a very high quality signal coming out of there.
And so I believe they started putting up some HD quality outputs of some of the Twitch shows on YouTube, and
they look
big difference. Really, really big difference.
They're gorgeous.
So,
yeah. And by the way, if you're watching this live show right now when we stream it, it is while we're streaming it, it's SD, of course, but we do post it to YouTube in 720p.
Yeah.
And the other questions, and by the way, if you haven't asked any questions, you can go to the live stream. You can on one side or the other, there's a place for you to ask questions. You can also vote them up and down. So there are places here to vote on questions, and we're going to keep on going through them. One of the questions that we have is there a significant shift in color for CFLs or even LEDs as they age?
For CFLs and for LEDs, CFLs and any of the Kino and the gas-based fluorescence or anything, they do shift in color over time. And the HMIs, which is a mercury vapor base, which is similar to the fluorescence. As they get older, they get warmer, and when they're new, they're extra blue, and then as they go through their mid-range, they're in a sweet spot, and they're a really great 56K, and then they get similar to any fluorescent bulb. It's a gas-based thing, so in time they do, and then they start to get a little flickery on the swirly bulbs, CFLs, a lot of that stuff, and the LEDs. A lot of the flickering
comes from the ballasts, right? Cheap ballasts.
Yeah.
And that tends to be what's causing the flickering.
It's a mixture of what kind of ballast. Is it a magnetic coil-based ballast?
Right.
Is it a square wave ballast, which is electronic, which is high frequency switching, which allow you to shoot off speed, meaning faster speeds or even slower speeds, different shutter speeds. And the LEDs, in comparison, some of them are not flicker-free. I've seen a lot of Christmas lights that are LED-based. You put them on camera, and we shot a music video at one point, just strobing badly, really, really noticeable. Like is hard to watch.
But they were cheap.
Yeah. But it's a really big concern as so many people are shifting to LED. There are not a lot of companies, and we talked about all these DJ companies that had these cheaper LED lights, and they're up and coming. There's only a few of them that specifically say our power sources and the way we power the LEDs are flicker-free. It's a very big deal.
Right.
Because if I had gone and spent thousands of dollars on lights in the Twit studio, and all of a sudden episode 1, there's every backlight's I had to do that research to know that it was going to be flicker-free, and that really narrowed it down to it was 2 companies.
Right.
And
that made it easy.
At that point, it was
What
price.
were the 2 companies?
It was Robi, and Robi.cz is the Czechoslovakian company we actually bought from. robe.cz is their site. The Light Force 7 and Light Force 18 lights are what are doing the twit backlights and color washes. And the other company that I bought, the Chauvet is the company. The batten strips, Colorado 72 battens are what I use for the bigger color washes. And that company, Chauvet, is a flicker-free.
Right.
There's a couple of them, Elation, Chauvet, even American DJ, as you know, they had a slow, goofy kind of, hey, we're like the wedding guys, and
right.
the cheesy karaoke type stuff, and they've come a long way. So all those companies I actually would trust.
How is different coloring managed as bulbs age over a single shot, start to final take?
Bulbs meaning?
How is a different coloring managed as bulbs age over a single shot?
If it was a long
different shots on location. So that's the I guess if it
on that's the point of another reason for meters, is that you're always going around and you're checking your color temperatures. Again, over a long stay period of project, you have a team who is looking at just that. And so if you have something where you're spending lots and lots of money, even if you're spending $1,000 a day on something, that's a lot of money to somebody.
Right.
If you've got 3 people and you're spending $1,000 a day, that's a budget.
Right.
And there should be some delineation so people can be efficient enough to just only have to think about some things and be really good. That's why you have a breakdown of a director and a producer.
Right. Well,
somebody's creative, somebody's logistic.
Well, and also the other thing that you're going to get into is that you have to remember that when you get these shots, when they all come in, your first light of everything is all over the place.
Right.
So the new digital cameras, whether it's the Arri or the Red, the modern digital cameras, have a pretty good range that you can work within, that you're going to be able to move around in. And
you're saying the latitude of exposure?
Latitude of exposure. Film gave you a lot of latitude of exposure. So that if you hit it as a DP, if you hit in the right range.
Exactly. And you could finesse it after the fact.
Because what's going to happen is that's going to go into your finishing studio, whether it's the Da Vinci or a smoke station or a flame station or a whatever those things are.
And they all go through that.
Everything's going to go through. Any big film is going to go through some kind of finishing.
Why not a little film?
Well, no, I'm sorry. And nowadays now that smoke is a lot less expensive than it used to be, Da Vinci is a lot less expensive than it used to be. There's a lot of tools, even Colorista. I know a lot of people using Colorista in a lot of just in their projects.
Right.
These are all tools that are that allow you to do all that last refinement. A lot of times, especially if you're going to shoot, on location, you're not going to hit all the shots right on. You have to get close because you can't take it from over here to over here.
Yeah.
But if the job is to get them all in a certain range, so that you can then, because at the end you're going to blend those all together. Because the reality is in the end, the director or the producer or somebody is going to decide we want it to all have this certain color hue to give like for instance in The Matrix, things were a little warmer in the real world and a little greener in the. That's all. That wasn't a decision made on set.
Yeah. Well, they generally talk about it ahead of time. Yeah. And in the higher end things, they're absolutely decided way ahead of time.
Oh no, but what I'm saying, they're shooting it well on set.
Yeah.
But they're not that color hue is being done in post.
And there are certain ways, like this is a good time for us to check in on our 2-shot. And we'll kind of look at, you're catching a little bit of the other key lights. If you lean back, if we were controlling that a little better. So this is what we were kind of intending for, was something along this line. We could actually dial your key light down a pinch because it came up in temperature. And I bet that now we're back to, we'll split the difference there. It takes a couple minutes for these Kinos to get up to speed, and we'll just universal light. There we go, we're back to, no. See when I gotta go back and forth. And I lose the button. So the idea is that we, comparatively, if we did an A-B between our 2-shot when we started and our 2-shot now, we made the specific decision that we wanted to mix color temperatures.
Right.
So that required warming some key lights. So we warmed the human beings. And then we turned on some cooler backlights, and we didn't verify what the temperature was on the backlights, but we will right now. They're at a 55K straight up. I would pull the diffusers out and give us a little bit more intensity, but this is fine for right now. But we've achieved what we talked about. We've got warm human faces. We have kind of a white, bluish, it's basically a white point background. We could adjust that and finesse it based on the color temperature of the camera because we made a shift from the 48. We dropped it a little bit to 4400 is what we switched to. 4400 Kelvin is what's on the camera. So at least we've achieved the goal where we wanted to mix some color temperatures. And this is much more real-world environment.
Right.
If you're familiar with what's going to be happening in front of your camera and what you've got already, maybe this is a window light coming in. You want blue light coming in from window to appear warm, so you can shift the color temperature of your camera to make that blue light look warmer. Then you can augment the fill light or the backlight that's coming from inside the home or whatever, just whatever you need in your scene.
Right.
If it's moody and it's supposed to be dramatic and dark and somebody's having a hard day, put them in front of a big window with the sheer in front of it, and you get this big soft light, and you keep a color temperature that's really cool so that it just feels white and cool. And color can emote and help with the emotion of scenes and all these things. And it's
also why a lot of DPs, well, this is one of the battles that goes on between the DPs and the producers and everything else, is the DPs want, a lot of times they want to make sure they're saving their LUTs and everything else that they were using on set.
It's like their thing.
Because that was what they saw on set. That's what they imagined when they shot it.
Yeah.
And they get very, perturbed when it goes into post and it looks like something completely different than what they had talked about.
There's a whole other team of people that go and manipulate that, and they manipulate it heavily.
Yeah.
There was actually episodes of that show, Heroes. There was a DP friend of mine, John Aronson, shot a bunch of the first episodes of that. I was on a TV show with him in Hawaii, worked with him for years, and I just started watching the show because I saw that he was a DP on a couple episodes. And I remember watching a promo piece of an interior, and there's like a dark-skinned guy, and then there's this light-skinned woman, and they were both in the same room, and there's some dramatic thing. And in the previews, it looked very even, kind of flat exposure. And then I remembered, wait a second, when it was like, previously on Heroes, and they did that bit. And it looked very different compared to what I remember seeing in the episode. And so I went back and got the download of it and watched the two. In the promos, they just skipped the whole color grade, and they just left it as it was in camera.
Right.
And that would mortify many DPs because they're like, it wasn't supposed to be.
Yeah, you weren't supposed to look at it that way.
You were supposed to process it.
Right.
Because they call it crushing the blacks and popping the whites, where they take anything dark and they make it darker, and then anything white they pop it out, and then the mid-range they'll slide the colors a little bit, and then you can get into all kinds of coloring tools, and you can grab various ranges of hue or saturation and manipulate them further, but there has to be an intelligent base to start that from.
Right.
Because you can't just have a super hot white backlight and then turn it into some soft feeling thing. There are practical things that happen with lighting, with camera settings, and with shadow creation that it can't be undone. Everyone's like, oh, use magic bullet looks and just apply the matrix look, and it's only going to work so far.
Right.
So
It's cute. I mean, and the one thing I will say about looks is that it's great if you are just trying to get to a start, and especially I like to look at them as a place to get started, and then you can sit there and tweak with it. And it is really great if you just want that wash that really looks like that, and you're not a colorist. You're not someone like that, but you want that look, or you have a client that says, I really want it to look like this movie.
Right.
Well, the great thing about looks is that's all there for you.
Right.
The next step is colorista, in my opinion, where you're going to get to sit there and dig into it and start making, creating that look that you want, and taking looks and building custom versions, then colorista to kind of move that down, and then you're now after you go out of colorista, there's this world of, okay, now we're going to go into the Da Vinci smoke finishing kind of stuff, where that's which is and I have to admit, we were just doing training here in smoke, and you can't, it's hard to imagine what kind of color correction tools you have until you open up smoke and you're like, oh, right,
wow,
so that's why people pay that much money for that. It's like, oh,
because you don't even see that world.
That's really nice. It's like suddenly you go, oh, I have a lot of control here.
It's the same thing, though, on the practical side as well. There are just as many tools when you have the knowledge to do stuff like we're doing here, when we could say, when we sat down here a couple weeks ago and we talked about the RGB lights, there was a single source coming from above. There was a little bit more backlight, actually. And if you compared a screen grab of a two-shot of us then and a two-shot of us here now, they can be very different.
Right.
And you could run each of them through Magic Bullet Looks or
They're never going to look the
Colorista,
same.
and the light quality is very, very different. They're going to feel completely, these are single cross-key sources where I have my own key light, you have your own, and the backlights are positioned appropriately opposite each of those. And so it's just kind of a standard classic two-person simple lighting setup, but totally subjective. It's just whether and that's the thing, is you'll get into something like a Magic Bullet looks, and then you'll start to be like, I wish it could make my backlights look hotter. That's not going to happen, but now you know. You can change the colors on your soft backlight, but you're not going to get that poppy quality without doing heavy manipulation or even rotoscoping or something really.
Which now that's getting, especially if you started that way, you're getting a lot of it.
Where all you might have had to do is just do something on set. We always say do as much as you can in camera.
Oh, absolutely.
And
that goes for effects. That goes for
Yeah.
When I talk about green screen, which we're going to talk about next week. By the way, we're going to talk about shooting green screen and some basics to think about, as well as some of the things that you can do there. But when I talk about green screen, it's always like get a great plate on set, and then anything can key it. Then you don't need a lot of. It's not very hard to like with DV-Mat or anything else. The way we shoot plates, a lot of times it's just like, whoop, okay, I'm done.
Yeah. Garbage in, garbage out is the
base. It's the
saying. Yeah.
More questions. Super interesting topic. This is from James Bowers. Can you do more of that in the future, like stuff you're chatting about? Yeah, we'll do more of these. We're definitely going to keep on talking about lighting. It is, in my opinion, the thing that sets really high-end films apart, I would say, and I don't want to be too American-centric, but American films do have a certain shine that, like, you travel all over the world, and there's a lot of great films, great stories, and everything else.
Generally European DPs, though. I don't know. It's like
so it's Europe, like a lot of European DPs. Well, there's a lot of European DPs and directors that get here, but there's a certain feel that American films have that now
they take the time.
Feels like money.
Yeah.
No. So, but where that money goes, in my opinion, a lot of that money goes into not necessarily into the story, but a lot of that goes into the lighting and sound, and that's one of the reasons we're talking about that today.
Yeah.
We're getting started with that. Is that lighting and sound is this thing that if you spend enough time on getting the right quality, getting the right pieces, and the same with sound, that's going to make a massive difference in the way your stuff's looking. We're starting to get to a point.
Absolutely.
We're starting to get to a point where this is evening out. Like there's tons of tools and there's tons of things that you can do and all that stuff. It's easy. But this is one of the ways you can differentiate yourself.
One thing about the Hollywood film machine and the magic that goes on there is that it's becoming a dying breed. There is the tapering off of the size of the movies that actually make money. There used to be this massive range of $5 million to $50 million features. There was this huge range in between. I used to work on $12 million and $14 million, $25 million features all the time. There was this massive market for them because they got sold on DVD. It was great money. If you were in the know, you knew a producer, you'd become an executive producer, you'd put your money in, and you'd get like 3 times your return or something in 6 months or something like that, or 18 months on a long shot. But there was this great money-making machine, so there was this middle ground. And now it only makes sense at large to shoot sub $5 million movies for the indies and all these things because they can still make some good cash here and there because it's just this little market. Or you got to go big and you got to go $50 million picture.
Yep.
And that's just clearing out all of this mid-range that used to be the staple. And that's how I got in the unions in the late 90s. And it's just gone.
Yeah.
And as that industry changes, more technicians and more people will, not even technicians, just more amateurs have the tools. It's all been democratized. We all have cameras in our pockets. And what's going to happen is the dying out of the skills that we're talking about, of taking, of looking at the shape of light or quality of the sound and how it.
Do you think it gets to a point where there ends up being a handful of extremely educated and knowledgeable production staff that's working on these massive films, and kind of everybody else that's
and
just
they lock it down even tighter because they don't want it to go away. As it starts to shrink up, they're like, we want to protect it even more. There's this huge push that's been going on for a long time. They keep filming in LA, Right. It's like, you guys, it's already out. You're like, come on, it's apparently right now it's super busy in Atlanta and in Chicago
and
all
also
over this
even
country.
overseas. I mean, we're seeing it explode. Obviously, India makes more films than the United States does.
Always has.
Nollywood in Nigeria makes more
Right.
films than Bollywood.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing Hillywood, which is Rwanda. You're seeing all these, and pretty soon we're going to stop saying wood because it's not going to mean, that's not going to be the center of it. But we're definitely seeing this film explosion because the tools are easy and you can make great films without the same investment that was done before.
I worked on a Bollywood picture. They came to Los Angeles and they had their
Was there
crew.
lots of dancing?
There was.
That's awesome.
And
it's so addicting.
The coolest thing they did was that this is in like '97 or something like that. They had a locked off camera and they shot a scene, and it was really big into like they would be talking and then all of a sudden they'd burst into song and some magic dust would go on behind them or something, and they did that with a blue screen bit. This was blue screen days. And they shot a locked off scene, and then 4 dudes come rushing in physically holding this sheet, and they just pull it over the background of something because we were in a house, and they just stretched it in thing, and we just banged a couple, just so haphazard, but just bam, do it now. And that's just how they work.
Right.
And all of us trained in Hollywood and departmentalized and unionized, we're just like, whoa, these guys are running all over. We're like, what,
Yeah.
Physically, they were running, which you don't ever want to run around.
Yeah.
But their work ethic was very chop, let's do it now.
We had that in Japan where I was on a set for 6 weeks, and the craziest one, I have a picture of it somewhere, but we had these guys on they needed rain.
Yeah.
And you got to get it was like 35 degrees out. I mean, it was cold.
Yeah.
And these guys, 35. It wasn't freezing, but it was
35.
It was 35. And these guys climbed up on 12-foot ladders. Mm-hmm. Okay, stood on the top of the ladders.
There's no OSHA there.
Yeah. No. Stood on the top of the ladder, took hoses.
Yeah.
And put
With
their
the
thumb in them, so there's like, and I have a picture of like 4
Give
of
me
these
another
guys.
one.
Yeah, they're just like, they're just sitting there, and they do that for like 10 minutes, like with their arm, just like, and then get
35 degrees.
And I will say that the rain looked really good, but
It's
you
a
could
skill.
never. Yeah, in the U.S. there'd be like there'd be like rigging and people and.
But it kind of says something when the rest of the world is just kind of making it happen.
Right.
When Bollywood comes to L.A. and they're just making it happen. They were doing plates. Basically, they were just flying in the blue screen into this plate, and it was a better key. Total haphazard dudes just stretching this thing, like rolling. These little guys are trying to hold this blue screen, and they get the shot, and then they go back to India and they keyed it out, and it made sense because we used to have big lavish production. We do a 40 by blue screen or green screen, and we would do the plate first, and then we would mesh everything, and they were like, no, we're just gonna do it right here. We'll just roto that out, and then all we need to do is key the 2 people because they're going to kiss, and then this pixie dust is going to fly, and they're going to sing and dance, and it's like, they just did it right there.
Right.
And it was kind of like, as low ball as it was kind of like, they just
There is something.
did it.
I look at a lot of guys doing shows, and I'm always like, I feel like sometimes I've been poisoned by working on too many big films because and I haven't worked on that many big films. I worked on one big film, and then I worked on lots of in between. But just working, what I mean by that is working on productions where I feel like I almost get stopped because I just don't think you should be able to do that. Like, that would take too long, or that setup will take too long. And but even us, like, we'll work with guys that have worked on lots of big films, and they even get like, we work faster than them. And then there's guys, but I walk into some guys that are shooting something every day, and they're just going crazy, and it's just mad.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a certain level of that energy that is important to keep around, because otherwise you lose track of what's important. One last question here. I read this week about fluorescent lamps and flicker. Is it true that we shoot the scene with proportional frame rate with electric frequency, that we can get it flicker free? And how does that work?
No,
so this is from Raphael Haddad.
When you're shooting off speed, meaning if you're a camera, if you want to edit at 24 frames a second or 30 frames a second, I know most of the 24 frames because I just came from film. So when you're shooting, it's multiples of that frame rate, 24, 48, 60 frames a second, and then multiples of that. So if you're shooting odd frame rates, like you can tell a camera to shoot 50 frames a second, but here there's a scale which is meant for the power that we have supplied from Edison or whoever your power company is 60 cycles per second, which is why televisions had 60 fields per second, which turned into 30 frames, because the electrical pulses happened at this certain timing in NTSC, and then it just carried over because it's all based on the power. And the frame rates happen to be to jive with the multiples of, I forget if it's divisible by 6 or if it's a multiple of 24 frames, but those are the speeds that are safe to shoot. For magnetic ballast and fluorescent lights, the quickest ones are 24, 48, 60 frames a second are safe shooting speeds. And then there are scales that you can look at for flicker-free safe shooting speeds at different power supplies or shutter angles.
Well, because I know that for us, one of the things that we had to do is that we were shooting in the Seychelles, and
Would you have 50 hertz
50
power?
hertz.
Yeah.
So we had to set the
So your
shutter
had to
at,
be at a 50th.
at 1/50th, and then
Yeah.
we still were shooting at 24 frames a second.
Yeah.
So, but the main thing was is that we had to make sure that shutter was going
Yeah,
at the same
exactly.
speed as the electrical,
Yeah.
and then we you know and then
Otherwise,
that,
it fights with it, and you get this kind of rolling and this strobing, and things just aren't jiving.
So you have to make sure that shutter speed. You don't have to change your frame rate, but you do
well,
have to.
if
But
you
you
do,
do have to adjust the
if
shutter
you
speed.
do change your frame rate, you can get in the same problem.
Right, but you can. But I can have my frame rate at 24 or 50 or in 24,
25.
25 or 60.
Yeah.
But I have to make sure that my shutter on my camera is running at the same as the electrical.
Exactly.
Because if
Yeah.
the shutter isn't now,
Right.
sometimes that looks a little weird because you're moving your shutter to some kind of
Yeah,
off. Whatever. Most
right.
people aren't going to notice that. What they will notice is the flicker.
Were you were shooting 24 frames?
24
At
frames.
50th of a second because of the power. Yeah, that would make sense. What kind of lighting were you using?
It was the lighting in the place. It was.
Okay,
It,
well,
it
yeah.
was. We
Yeah.
were doing it behind the scenes
it
and
was-
stuff. So
there was lighting. It wasn't just all sun. It wouldn't matter. So.
Right. It was
Yeah.
no. It was lighting. That was the problem. It was one
Yeah.
of those things. Like what was interesting was on the red you couldn't see it.
Yeah.
You know, like in the preview that
Right.
we were shooting, and so we started shooting, but I could really see it on my 5D
Right.
or my 7D, on my 7D that I took
Right.
taken down there, and so I was like looking at it, and I was like, we should review some of that red
Yeah,
footage,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and then when
Did
I
any
zoomed it up,
strobe?
and we were getting this little like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
well, it looked like a little wrinkle going, you know, like a whole bunch of little wrinkles
Like a
going down,
slow
yeah.
rolling shutter.
Yeah,
type
yeah,
thing,
it was ugly.
Yeah,
So
they're weird things that happen.
it was
but
ugly.
that's
So.
that's just it. You just to be conservative, you would match your shutter speed of the camera 50th or 60th based on your power source, which is 60 cycles or 50 cycles.
Yep. That's how you match
Basically,
that.
Europe, U.S.
So if you've got questions, have you covered what you had laid out?
Yeah, we
Anything
just
else?
wanted
'Cause
to
I
do
got-
our two shot that had warm and whitish. We went
We
blue
did.
on the backlights because we changed the color temperature of the camera to make us look less Oompa Loompa orange. But this was just a quick, simple
Fantastic.
explanation of using a mixed color temperature, keeping the conversation universalized by our lighting meter and color meter. And I just want people to start considering the mix of color temperatures is everywhere at all times. It's great to create depth with. It's great to create feeling. It's great to just consider. When you white balance your camera to what lighting is in the room, boring. It's just
Safe.
It's just but
Well, and you looked at it
boring.
here.
It's
Like that's what we did here. Is that this is if you'd white balance it, there was no way to get this.
Yeah.
What we're looking at, especially on a live stream, because this you have to gel something to
Yeah.
get this cool in,
Yeah,
in our
exactly.
hair and the you know so that's what's
Yeah.
required.
And the simplest tip and trick for shooting outside is to get this kind of a feel with something is to, when you take your white card outside, say this wasn't a gray card, it was a white card, if this was the sun, and I'm shooting you outside and the sun has a nice key on you, instead of me having a white card here, me pointing my camera at here and doing a white balance on the sun as I see it, I often turn the card to get a shadow or to away from the sun, so I'm getting filled from a blue sky. And instead of white balancing directly to the sun, I white balance to the shade of the sun, or even a white side of a building or something that's not in the direct sun, or is even having some reflection from a blue
It's
sky.
going to cool what it's looking at, but warm everything else
Yeah,
up.
the camera is going to cool down extra, and then people will just look warmer, and all you did was pull the trigger on the camera to white balance to not direct sun exactly as it is, just to the shadier side.
Right.
And then you can kind of split the card too and take a little bit of the light off and just play with it.
Yep.
That's the idea, is just play with it, adjust it, and don't just always do the white balance in the light, because then everybody looks And we don't want This is about the traditions of film and keeping them alive and having
Well, the first step is to make
beauty
sure
and-
that your video doesn't stink, and then the next
Yeah.
step is to
Then make it awesome.
It's time to work
Then
on
it's
awesome.
awesome
Yeah,
time.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, and you will make some mistakes, and it will look
Yeah.
great.
Like this has been. So we should talk about some audio stuff, huh?
Okay, audio. So again, if you've got any questions, you can post them. If you're watching the live stream on one of these sides here, you're going to be able to see little place where you can click on so you can ask questions, and we're going to talk. It's kind of a free-form conversation. So what happened was I was speaking last week at VidCon, which is kind of a lot of people who are producing for YouTube and people who go to watch YouTube stuff down in LA. It's a little talk for them. And we did this little talk, and I was kind of surprised at how many people showed up for my little talk. It was actually put on by Revision 3, and it was myself and a couple other folks talking about production. And one of the big things people kept on asking about it: what kind of mics do you use? What kind of audio interfaces do you use? What kind of where do you go with all that? And so I thought that I would just have kind of a free-form discussion of some of the stuff that we use to kind of cover that. So I brought a couple mics and a couple.
And I hope everybody has the opinion that audio is extremely important, because there's an old adage that says if it sounds like crap, it looks like crap. It is really, really true. You can have a beautiful image, as we've been discussing this whole time, and if you have bad audio, using the microphone on the camera is always such a bad idea. I've seen promotional videos for companies that they went through the expense, they lit the scenes, and they used the microphone on the camera.
And it just...
And it sounds horrible, and it makes it look bad.
And we never do that.
Yeah.
And I forgot my little my little case. I forgot it at my house. I pulled it out this morning. I realized it. But I thought I'd show a couple different devices that we use. And for interfaces, now there's one here. There's two. You'll see that are the same. And we're going to talk a lot more about this one later, but we're not going to get into that at the moment. So, a couple things as far as microphones go. One of the things I wanted to show. So, this is one of the standards. So this is the SM58.
Bulletproof.
I've
hammered a nail with that before.
Yeah, you have hammered the nail. Boom, boom, and then it still works. It's like a Samsung.
It does.
So the SM58 is the Samson of. This is the Samson of the Samsonite of microphones. It's been around for 50 years. It is extremely robust. And it is, and I'm not sure why we're not getting a close-up. That's what we're looking for here. Anyway, so this is here now. It's XLR. For those of you, you'll see 1/8 inch and other connections.
Right.
You really want to start with a mic
that's
got a balanced XLR. Even if at the end you're going to put it into an 1/8 inch jack, the 1/8 inch jack is unbalanced. Right. And the reason that's important when you're doing audio is that balance is going to take care of a lot of it won't take care of all the problems, but a lot of the noise that you get on a long line or going around power and everything else, a lot of that gets evened out on a balanced cable. And there's a lot of hiss and crackle and noise and everything else that's inside of an unbalanced cable.
Right.
And so you want that to be short. And we, like for instance, this is one way that you can handle that is, this is a Beach Tech. This is what we've used for a long time. This is the one for the DSLR, and what this has is 2 XLR ins, and so you have 2 XLR ins. You can also do analog here, and then you have individual pot controls for those in a volume, and then you can power them or not power them, and then they have this is for auxiliary, and I keep it plugged in so I don't lose it. But primarily this is going to go into my little handy cam. So if I've got like a DSLR
or even camera, a high-end Canon 5D or 7D, they've just got the little 1/8 inch.
Yeah, so this is actually built. This one is actually built for the 5D.
Now, the question before about a small camera sub $3,000. You're going to have the same type of audio input for a lot of those things, not a full XLR input.
Right. So so you get one of these to convert it. It's $300 or $400. So this is one. Sound Devices now makes one.
Oh.
And I haven't gotten it yet. I haven't gotten one to test yet.
Have you seen the size of it?
It's a little bit bigger than this one, a little longer, but it's pretty nifty. Now another thing that you can do, and this is something that a lot of people, this is pretty popular. This is a Zoom H4, and one of the things is if you're doing little recordings. This little guy has 2 mics that are built in, but it also has XLR and TRS at the bottom. So this multi-input is great because you can put an XLR in there, but the TRS, that's basically a 1/4 inch stereo jack. TRS is tip, ring, sleeve. Yeah. But what that means is a 1/4 inch stereo jack that is in a device that it knows what it is not stereo anymore. It's balanced. It's a balanced 1/4 inch jack.
A ground, a positive, and a negative signal, tip, ring, sleeve.
Exactly. And so now one of the things that you can do with this is, like for instance, if I'm doing a concert I'll go up to the guy on the board and say, hey, can I jack into your aux?
Can I jack in?
Jack into your aux in. What I want is, if you got a cool guy and you get him a beer or something like that, or a six-pack in some countries.
Got plenty of outs on those boards.
What they have is, a lot of times what they have is an aux auxiliary out. So in those big concert boards, they'll have oftentimes 3 to 6 of these aux outs. Then they're using those for send and receive. They almost always have a free
systems,
one.
It's got to go to video house. It's got to go all over the place.
Those are the cleanest signals in the board. You take the tape out, it's horrible. It's all noisy. It's been through everything. But the aux outs are clean. And so what you do is you
AUX auxiliary.
Yeah, auxiliary out. And what you have is, if they're cool and you're cool, and you sound like you know what you're talking about, and that's why if you say, don't say, can I have your auxiliary out or whatever, just say, hey, do you got a spare aux out I can jack into? You know, that's like, it's like, like that. They go,
Whilst
okay, he kind of, while here, let me give me a beer. Well, you start with the beers in half an hour before.
There you go.
Then you come in and you ask for the aux out. So what you can do is you can jack that in, and if you're cool and he's cool, oftentimes they'll let you actually touch that. Those are the volume controls for every channel in the board.
Really?
That won't affect anybody else's audio. Now, they have to really trust you, because if you mess with their board, they won't know what to go with. It's a big board.
Because they have an actual level of the output of the auxiliary.
But if you set aux to pre-fader, basically you have all the faders for the aux. But anything you do to that channel is only affecting that channel going out. And this is also good even if you have the board. Then they can switch it, but more importantly, you can switch it. Like if the voice is too high. A lot of times what will happen is that for a live event, the vocals, they're going to pump that vocal for the live event because it sounds better the way it's absorbed, because it's going to get absorbed into people a lot faster. So the vocals are up really high, but when you actually listen to the recording, it just sounds like there's a person with like gear like way off in the distance. And so this allows you to push that down and back into the music. Anyway, so 4-channel recording, about $300. So it's a pretty inexpensive little recorder.
What's the recording media?
It is recording to SD card.
Okay.
And it also can act as a USB interface to your computer. So you can actually plug these in and then plug this in and make it an interface. It's a little wonky on some of the settings.
As an input interface.
Yeah, as an input interface.
Not just download.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's kind of a good all-purpose. It's got a quarter 20 on the bottom, so that you can. The quarter 20 will allow you to attach it to a tripod.
Any tripod.
Any tripod there, you can kind of put it on there, and sometimes the bottom will fall out.
Don't need that.
Don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And so it's a pretty nifty little guy for the price. Now,
it's a lot of variety. That's great.
It's a lot of variety, and as I said, it's a little less expensive. When I'm going overseas, I tend to use it a lot.
Is that also a DC in power source between?
Yeah. So yeah, you have DC in or battery, and the battery lasts a long time.
Okay.
What's important about battery, by the way, is that what's nice about battery is sometimes you get into a point where you get a ground loop. You hear a buzz.
From the battery.
No, you get a ground loop because you're plugged in, other equipment's plugged in, and you get a loop, and you hear this buzz. It's nice to have a good set of batteries in a recorder in the field, because the fastest way, I mean, you can get into they have these humbugs and all kinds of other things that you plug into that'll take that out. A lot of times they're not completely effective. And what's great is you just pull the power source out, and then you're done. Right. There's some guys I know that do audio and video that literally have those 6-volt battery, like those, and all their equipment is plugged in to 12-volt. They're just plugged into these batteries, and they're not connected to the wall, and they don't get any of the hub.
Well, also, one solution for on set that happens a lot of people aren't aware of, is audio cables. You're running an XLR out of any mic. If you run audio cables parallel to or near any power cables, the buzz can come from there. So if you have to cross cables, cross it parallels.
Yep. Always, and not at an angle.
Or sorry, perpendicular.
Perpendicular.
And if you have to run parallel to any power cable, separate by 1 foot minimum. And then if you're running along and you got to cross, you do 1 foot separation between audio and power cables, and then you cross over to perpendicular.
Yep.
And that will often get rid of the buzzing.
A lot of that stuff. And we often try to think about routing, our audio on one side of the room and our video on the other.
Separating all
power
that.
On that. But you can't always do that. The other thing that this is good for is doing dual audio. So, the old-fashioned film thing, which is that you get into this thing where you record. If you have a cheap camera and you can't get the right audio out of it, what you can do is you can get an XLR, put it in here, have this mic or some other mic, connect these, put this in your back pocket.
Yeah.
You know, and then just have the person sitting there talking.
that.
Now, the one thing is with your little camera, you want to make sure that's getting audio because you're going to need to sync that back up again.
Or on
You need
camera,
to-
give a clap.
Yeah, and what you want to
Sync
do
clap.
when you do a sync clap, by the way, you want to what we
Look
find.
at the camera
Look at the camera,
so you can see the.
and you want to go like there's a science to this.
Yeah.
Hands are very, very straight.
Yep.
And you want to go in and out as fast as you can. So you want to go like that because if you do this, there's a bunch
really
of
hard
it's
to
really hard to
tell.
figure out
Yeah.
what that frame actually was. So if you do that, a lot of you can tell when you're off.
How good are you at mini slate?
The mini slate.
It's hard to open up that quick. Mini slate.
So that doesn't work as much with sound.
Close up, it's good. Mini slate.
Yeah, but what the mini slate? I thought I created the mini slate.
You did. I'm giving
okay.
you props.
There we go. Yeah,
That was your
so
thing.
that's what we used to call
Sort
it.
of.
We call it the
Crushing
mini
your head.
slate. We'd call it the mini slate, which is that when you have a host especially who hasn't done a lot of stuff, that you don't want them to sit there and play with the thing, whatever. So just give me a mini slate, and so you have all three cameras point at them, and they just go. And it's really funny. We had some guys that, and that's all. Just a little.
Which is really hard to sync to. It's like you don't really.
It
know.
is, but it's better than nothing.
You got to go on the close, not on the open or anything.
Right. Yeah. So but we found that was good to get us close.
Yeah.
And so anyway, it's a goofy thing. Anyway, so but if you get that, you can then sync this all up. The best way to do it is singularize, even with the new tools that are available.
Oh, the software that just
Singularize, it's pluralize. Singular software, pluralize.
pluralize is the software that syncs.
Looks at all the audio.
Takes the waveforms, matches them all up, and just slips and slides in.
So if you do the dual audio, it just
How many NLEs does it do that for? Final Cut Pro.
Vegas, Premiere, Final Cut Pro. I think Media Composer, but I'm not 100% sure. So it does all the major ones, as far as syncing that
Pluralize.
stuff up. Pluralize. It's really
That's a lifesaver.
Lifesaver. And we'll get to some of these questions here in a second. This is really useful. This is I'm not going to say the crew name for this on the air, but this is a transmitter.
Wireless transmitter.
Wireless transmitter. So this works. This is, and Sennheiser makes this one, but a lot of people make them. We have. Here's the thing: is that I would say that we're cheap, and
those are cheap compared to some of the other brands.
So our goal is to move to Letrasonics, which are really the top of the best in my opinion. But they're expensive. They're $2,700 a set, and we're gonna.
These have been giving us about 80% uptime in all this Twit live streaming stuff.
Yep. And the thing is now, and I think you have the nicer ones. You have the 500s.
Yeah.
These are the 100s.
And they still get hits, and you used to be like, "Oh, I'll never use those things," but it's
now that I'm in
convenient.
Petaluma, now I'm in Petaluma, I use them more often because in San Francisco these were useless. I mean, they were just like
we'd be in Vegas, we'd be in Detroit, we'd be in Austin, Texas.
In Vegas, there's one part of the central hall that all of our mics flip out on, right around the Panasonic booth. They just like flip out. I don't know whether it's something Panasonic's doing.
CES did the same thing at the
Panasonic booth in the middle, right in the middle. So I don't know whether it's Panasonic is in both the same place.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether it's something they're doing or that place in the hall is like there's something.
Could be a major.
I think there's a unicorn.
Wi-Fi hub.
I think there's a bunch of dead unicorns that have been buried under the.
Yeah.
I think that's what's causing it. And I think we should.
Or Jimmy Hoffa's ghost.
Right, exactly.
Is actually there.
So this just screws in here like this, and it acts like a cable. So basically, you can set this up. You can have a bunch of these as long as they. You can have a whole slew of these as long as they're set to the. You want each mic to be set to something different.
Yeah.
And so you can have a bunch of transmitters. We have 2 or 3 of these receivers.
The key to using those live, when you do get a radio hit, it sounds like a.
Yeah.
And you'll get those are the radio hits as opposed to drops or scratches.
Right.
You get this kind of electrical type thing. And as soon as I'd start to hear that, as the camera guy with the earphones, I'd be like, it's my job to monitor the audio. There's no mixer. I'm running around with a live view.
Right, exactly.
And then the key to those is knowing how to switch the frequencies really quick.
Yeah.
Like I gotta get, if I gotta change Leo's mic or something, get whoever's co-hosting to vamp about something.
And the first thing to do is to switch it away from the one that you bought it on.
Yeah.
Because it's going to come, like this one, for instance, comes, this is in the 518 to 575 or whatever.
Something.
Go to 535, go to 538, go to something. Don't go to, move it away because 80%, it's kind of like the most common passwords, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
Everybody just buys these things and they turn them on and go, oh, they work.
Yeah.
Okay. And then they can't figure out at CES why they hear all this crosstalk. Well, it's because everyone's set to the same frequency.
Yeah.
So anyway, but these work fairly well. They're $500 or $600 a set. They're not cheap. I have not found ones that cost less than that.
Right.
That are good. These are minimum useful.
And of course, keeping in mind the other side of that, that's the transmitter, and it also has a receiver pack, which is similar to.
Yeah.
Basically, it is identically to.
It can look like that, or we have ones in the
These
office.
are transmitters, but the receivers are identical to what we.
You can get receivers like that for your camera, and then we also have box ones they're a little bit more robust.
What do they have? 2 per?
You plug them in.
Which ones are those?
2 antennas. We got them in the other room. So we have them so that you can you plug them in, set them up.
What are they? The dual ones? Do we have two frequency receivers?
No, these ones are just singles, but they have 2 antennas and they're a little bit more robust as far as the stuff. Now the other things that I got here, and we'll talk about a lot of different things here, but the this is the PR40. This is what Leo got me hooked on. Bob Hiles.
The PR40.
I love the way you can't hear me, but I love the way I sound in these.
I asked Bob about the end address. Does it have the sticker on there that says this is an end address microphone?
It doesn't, but I do know that it's an end address.
Because all the voiceover stuff I did for all my old automotive was a side address, large diaphragm microphone, and Bob Heil explained to me how those are so massively inferior to the end address style that he's invented for these, and the guy's right.
Sounds
great.
They
sound phenomenal.
They do sound great. Now I have one weird thing in my house is that I pick up some little buzz at one angle.
Huh.
Like if
like
it's
a
pointed,
reflection?
like literally if my mic's pointed anywhere than perpendicular to my walls, or I'm sorry, parallel to one of the walls, I get this little buzz. Now I'm told that it was because at first I was told that it was because there was no humbucker coil in here, but then Bob told me that there is a humbucker coil in it, so I don't really know. So anyway, but this is, in my opinion, $250 or $240 or something, and this is the best voice. Now, but here's what I'll say: is this is my favorite mic. Everybody's voice is different, and so what you want to do, this one happens to work really well with my signature. You really want to go, if you can, to a Guitar Center or a, wherever you're going to go, and go through a lot of mics and see what one you sound good on.
This is a dynamic mic or a condenser?
Dynamic.
Okay, and does not require phantom power?
Yes, which is awesome.
Does not require necessarily a preamp, but can benefit from some type of
it'll tend to come
warming.
it'll tend to come in a little quieter on a preamp. Now, and preamps are important. So
yeah, that's the thing. Is
let's talk about preamps, because preamps are very, very important.
Now, with the dynamic microphone, I relied on my large diaphragm mic with 48-volt phantom power preamp to warm the sound.
Yep.
And I was really up on it, and I would concentrate on exhaling only, and just for voiceover stuff to.
Yep.
So the difference when you're using a large diaphragm dynamic microphone, what are you doing for processing and warmth after?
Well, I don't do a lot of processing on it. Of course, what you can do is you can do an EQ. You just go in with a EQ, and you can say, well, I want to bring up my. I have to admit, my voice doesn't need to get EQ'd that much from. If I get the right position, it is pretty solid in the bass area. It's not. I wouldn't say it's as bassy as sometimes I like, but you can always go in there and you can go. I go in, and this is going to be another show, but you can go into a channel equalizer, and you can sit there and you can really
multi-band.
You get into these bands and you can sit there and go, well, I'm going to pull this up and push this down a little bit, and I'm going to drop off after 16 and drop down, and do a roll off at 50.
Similar to color timing of crushing blacks, popping whites.
Exactly. So you can do a lot of the same things, and so you're going to that post happens in audio, and so what I'm usually worried about is I want something good and clean. I don't want to have it. I don't want to do a lot to the mic. I'm going to fiddle with that. I want it to be a really solid. What I don't want is a lot of noise. Which the more you run it through things. So the one problem with running it through analog processors is the more I run through things, the more noise I'm going to add. And so I tend not to like that. I want to try to get it recorded as quickly as possible. And this is actually one of the things that. So this is like we spend a little extra on our recording devices. So this is a good piece here.
One more thing about the large diaphragm microphone. So you're generally always going to put some type of audio compression as the very last step?
Sometimes.
Really?
I don't always compress things. I almost always compress if I'm having a couple people talking to pull them all back together, because if the volumes aren't quite what I want. On my own, sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. It depends on what I'm doing.
Now, is that maybe a quality of this particular microphone that you stopped using audio compression?
So here's the thing: is that I like using audio compression to pull everything back together. If I find that if I'm in a quiet environment and I'm recording well, what I like is that natural flavor that I get before compression. Now
Right.
I may compress it a little bit,
Right.
but I find if I compress it too much, it just sounds the more you compress
Yeah.
it, the more flat you make it. And it's kind of like lighting everything very...
Well, especially with digital compression as opposed to an actual analog box.
well,
Or-
even that, I just find
I
that...
really hear the differences.
Yeah, I just find that I don't want... I used to compress everything, 3-to-1.
Yeah.
You know, and I would just pound it.
Yeah.
I found it hard to listen to when it's overcompressed. I find that my ears got a little bothered
Yeah.
and everything else. And I was talking to somebody who was recording for NPR, and they go, "Yeah, we don't like to compress that much. You know, like they like it to really sound natural." And so I kind of took the NPR route after that and tended. Now I do like to, especially if I'm having a group of people, I want to pull them back together a little bit. And then the other thing, and I said, if you get good clean audio, I think that works well. Now this is the interface that we use for our computers.
Yeah.
Now this is not, there's a lot of inexpensive interfaces that you can get. This is not one of them. So this is a Sound Devices interface. Now, very, very solidly built. Here, you can grab onto one. So you can feel
Ooh,
it.
it's light.
It's light, but
a lot lighter.
And grab onto the little dials. These are not like little plastic dials.
Yeah.
This is so now.
This is nice machine.
Yeah, this is for the audio person who has everything. So now what you've got here is I've got
nice audible clicks on the push button, so you can hear that you push the button.
all
See,
the
they
little
think
details.
about all
Yeah.
those little details.
So I've got mic in, two mics in, and then I've got my 2 lines in that I can put in here, and then I've got aux ins, I've got analog in. I've got individual control over those. I've got a headphone. I also can control the difference between my computer. So this is a USB interface. So you can see here, I have USB here, but I also I can do SPDIF out, aux out, and then I have both headphones, both 1/4 and 1/8 inch jack. Now, so as a recording device, now this is about, I think it's about $650. So it's not, now, but if you're getting serious about it, and there are a lot of less expensive ones, you can use this H4n. There's the X2U that is made by Shure, which is a great little, like, one-line little interface. There's tons of interfaces in the $150 range.
Right.
If you can get one of these, this is great. If you can't, there's lots of other options. This is truly like if you're looking at, I want the high-end way to get into my computer, and I want to know that it sounds great because these preamps are really warm. And that's the one thing. And here's the most important, there's one really big thing that's in this. This is a USB interface with true professional limiters. And so what I know is I can ride a little hotter on these because you cannot clip it.
Right. You were telling me about these.
Yeah,
these are just
you
just
can't clip it.
yell.
And that is one of
into
the big
mic.
things. Have you ever heard this? The problems that we were hearing early on with some of the recordings. Where there's a little that crunchy sound is you peaking, and so you're not dealing with that here. Now the other thing that's real key for us in production is these little 2 connectors in the back. This is XLR. These are XLR outs.
Balanced out.
Balanced out. This is the best solution for a balanced output from a computer that I've found so far. And so and what that means is that I can go right into a professional system. I can get buzz-free, noise-free, straight out from my USB on my computer, converted straight to high-quality analog video. Now there's also Toslink and other things, but that balanced out, so you can do in and out of this guy. And now this is using the same preamps as this guy here. Now this one I'm not going to get too much into. We're going to talk about it. This is the 788, and it's my favorite device, and we're going to talk about that later. Yeah. But this is like the big brother of this, and we're going to talk about this on another show. This is what we use in most of our pipelines for when we're recording in the field.
Yeah. With recording capability as opposed to just
records to hard drive, compact flash.
Interface.
This is an entire router, so I can route all my inputs, and I can combine them, uncombine them, re-evaluate them.
Very helpful.
Yeah, I can do all kinds of things with them, but we're going to talk about that in detail some other time. Let me see what we got questions here. Can you explain more about balanced and unbalanced and mic versus line audio? We're gonna do a whole session. We're either gonna do a session in Gear Media Tech, but we are threatening to do a whole thing that's just dealing with audio. There's been so many. This is kind of a prep for this, but we're thinking about doing a whole show like this that's just audio engineers sitting there talking about audio. And so I don't want to spoil that too much, but this is where a balanced versus unbalanced talk goes. And mic versus line audio is really where you have to gain it. So mic's coming in at typically at minus 40 dB from audio. That's what the mic level is. And so you just have to turn it up a lot more, or you have to have a device that knows, oh, I'm getting mic instead of line, and I'm going to switch that. And there's more to it, but that's a good way to think of it. So mic's going to come in a lot lower than, so if you have something that's only taking line in and you put mic into it, you can't hear it. 40 dBs is a long way, so that's the real issue there. How to avoid wireless hits. I use Sennheiser G3s, that's the same ones that we use, great mics, but sometimes they take hits even when there are no competing frequencies. What's the best way to avoid taking hits when using wireless mics?
Switch the frequency.
Yep, find another frequency.
Just keep
There's something
switching, which is horrible when you're shooting live, but you just got to flip through, and sometimes you just got to take the hits, and you just being good at flipping those frequencies is the only way out of that mess.
Right. Yeah. So I find different frequencies. That is definitely the way I go. What are my recommendations for ENG wireless mic kits? My recommendation is really at the lowest budget. I would say the G3s, the Sennheiser G3 100s is as low as I would go and really feel. Otherwise, if I'm going to go below that, to be honest with you, I'd use wired. Like I would. The one that I lust after is the Electrosonics. They tune those each one by hand before it leaves. That's why you're paying extra, and it's it's really. And I'm looking at the Line 6s. I think Leo has a couple of Line 6s, and they're starting. They had been doing.
Was he hiding them? We never brought them out on our live streams.
No. They're for here. They're not mobile. Okay. I don't know if he's using them, but I saw a couple of them laying around. I think they're in testing somewhere. The issue with the Line 6s, what's cool about them is they go digital, and then they just go there. It's converted, so there's none of that analog. You don't pick up any cell phones. The problem is that they run at 2.4 megahertz, which is the same as Wi-Fi. And so if you're in a heavy Wi-Fi area, I'm a little afraid.
Phones
not so much cordless phones, but really it's the Wi-Fi. We have 25 Wi-Fi, 2.4 Wi-Fi. I think it's 3.4 or 2.7, whatever. I don't know if I want to do that. So. Other question, this is from Brian Dodds. What's up with all the audio love, but still not much video camera love? The reason that there's a lot of audio love, Brian, if you come up here, we'll put you on, and then we'll talk about video.
There we go.
I need someone to talk to about it. I mean, we're going to talk about more video.
Yeah.
And we've talked about a lot of lighting. We've talked a lot about sound. Video is coming. What I wanted to do is, obviously, I can do some of the talking about video. You can do some of the talking. And if no one else comes up, you and I are going to have conversations about cameras. What I'd love to do is get engineers like Brian, who's watching the show.
There's also
Thanks, Brian.
a lot of changes going on right now. We're in a holding pattern, sort of, for everyone's crossing fingers for a big Canon announcement.
Yeah, the rumor is the Canon announcement might happen as early as September or October. It could be shipping by November or December, by the end of the year.
There's so many people shooting 5 and 7D.
Here's the scuttlebutt.
Yes.
Should we tell them?
I've heard from people that aren't going to get killed if we squeal, so yeah.
4K. That's what I've heard. 4K.
All right.
Sensor, full frame sensor, full 35 millimeters, so an APS sensor, running at 4K, 444 option, $10,000 to $12,000. True video camera. That's the
XLR inputs.
XLR inputs.
Assist. Possible. Well, I don't know if there's going to be no aperture, actual physical aperture, because of the EF lens mount series.
Right. Oh yeah, but you're going to be doing, but you're putting Canon lenses on the front of it.
Yeah.
So exchangeable lenses. It is Canon going straight after the basically F3. I think that's really what they're aiming at. They're not really aiming at the red. They're aiming at the F3.
Yeah. But they'll pick up the ancillary market because everybody that shoots Alexa and red, they also shoot Canon 75D.
Right. Right, and there's a lot of people that have collected all those lenses.
All EF mount lenses.
The idea that we put those lenses on.
Yeah.
So, but we are going to be talking a lot more about cameras, and again, like the audio discussion, eventually we're looking at a camera-only discussion. But we've started here, but we are going to get into the cameras. I'm trying to persuade Calvin to come up. And really.
What we need to do is have all these cameras that we can switch through.
Yeah.
So we can hook them up and look through them and talk about why.
Talk about scopes and talk about really look at them and everything else. So that discussion is coming. We're not skipping cameras. We just haven't gotten to it yet. This is the second.
Yeah. We can't blow the whole enchilada. Come on.
I mean, this is taking us 2 hours to get here. Tell Brent that if you use a rectifier on LED Christmas lights, it may eliminate the flicker.
That's
this is
a
from
good
Brian
tip.
Dodds. Brian Dodds
Thank
again.
you, Brian. Check him out.
So
Right.
yeah,
Thanks, Brian.
we need to get Brian up here and chat a little. Brian's a Pixel member and an excellent camera engineer in LA. So and so now if you have any other questions, if you don't, we're going to run out of space here real quick, and I'm going to start drinking beer. And you're going to start drinking beer.
I'm going to start drinking beer.
Yeah, I didn't, so.
But yeah, we'd have more.
But if we have any more questions,
audio
questions, this is it. Audio
lighting.
or lighting. We're wrapping up. Oh, one more thing that I brought out. Some people hear IFB, and I thought that I would show what this is. I use this on MacBreak, and I use it a lot of times when I'm doing shows. Not today, but.
I mean, you're an Interstellar fun boy.
Yes. So. An Interstellar
IFB.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, this is your in-ear. So here you have this little. Now, what's happening here is you've got a headphone jack, and this is a mono headphone jack, and I've got this is the audio. This is actually the audio box. This is where the audio is coming out of. The response mic is here, or the speaker is here. This is just an air tube, which is cheap and replaceable, which is kind of nice.
They get clogged.
Yeah,
and then you blow them out with air.
And then you.
That's why you have a disconnect right there. You know that one, right?
Yeah. I've had to do that a couple times already. So, anyway, and then this is just a nice. What's nice about this is that you have something that's really expensive. Not really expensive. These have gotten down to $40, $50 each.
Yeah.
When I bought them, they were more. But then this guy came out and he was making these knockoffs, and then the auto ones dropped in price. So.
Oh, you can get them on Amazon from a Chinese company for like $4.
Right.
Which is just the speaker and the assembly, but they're okay.
Anyway, so the auto ones work. These are the kind of the industry standard ones.
Auto meaning OTTO. Auto Nemitz being the brand.
Yes, Auto.
And
so anyways, here's what you plug this into your audio out. This little clip. The reason that this little clip is here is it clips onto your. Usually your undershirt in the back to keep it kind of out of the way.
Lapel, anything,
but it looks better if you put it on your undershirt in the back because then it just comes out.
It's more comfortable too.
And this guy comes up over your ear, and there you go. You pop it in, and it's not that you can't see it at all. Now, one thing I find is if I go away from my ear, if I clip it on the other side of my ear, it kind of wraps it, it wraps it so that you don't see it as much.
Right.
And oftentimes you think of it like I'm putting it on this side. Because I'm talking to Brent.
Right.
So now I'm going to put it on this side, and now people can talk to me, and I can. And when I'm looking at the camera, you're never going to, you barely see it. You might go, oh, he's got a hearing aid, but he doesn't.
Right.
So if I turn it here, you can see it now. If you get the other angle, but you can see how it looks pretty natural, and and the audio quality is good enough for someone to talk to you. What you use these for, of course, is if you've got a producer that is going to talk to you and tell you stuff. You're not listening to music. You're not trying to gauge the quality of the audio. But it's really, really useful. I use it when I've been on a couple like TV stuff and everything else. And what's really nice about it is I can hear the Skype conversation. I can do all that stuff and look a little bit more natural.
Right.
And you'll never look at Anderson Cooper again the same way because every broadcaster has one when you're watching them on TV. That's how people tell them that the commercial breaks are coming up, or that you got 15 seconds, or you got whatever. They have some heads-up stuff, but this gives them the ability. And you'll see us wearing them more during shows.
But some people like myself are extremely bothered by the plug version that you have. There are molded earpieces that allow all the sound to go through your ear as well as the little tube. Because what we use for walkie-talkies on set.
Yeah, because these are also really popular as walkie-talkies on set. Yeah. Using some version of this. Oftentimes they make another one of these that has kind of a dual line, so that you can either clip it here or you can clip it onto your shirt sleeve and
the microphone. That's what we have.
Or you can hit this, and there's one of these Give Me a Text we can talk about the communication. Yeah,
it's a big deal.
It's a big deal, and not.
I didn't really think about it. It's everyone talks about social networking and all the kids growing up. They have all these communications and chat, and I was 19 when I started in the film business, and I always had this plug in my ear.
Right.
And I was just ever since a kid, every day at work, I'm used to at least my own channel in my ear. You're talking to people, and you have to go like this. and then you point to this, and you're like, or people look off into space because they're listening to. It takes training to get used to listening to multiple channels and voices in your head.
Right. Especially when you're on more than one loop.
Yeah.
You know, so you'll be on like the producer. Well, a lot of times when we're on live shows, we're on the producer's loop and the camera loop. And you have to remember which button to push. And you're like, I don't know what we're doing now. Yeah, exactly.
And then you got to communicate back, but it's important. It's really
but how
important.
you communicate, and we'll talk about that. We'll have a conversation about that again. We are, I think we're near the end. We've covered it. As I said, it was kind of an open-ended thing. If you've got questions, you know, we're gonna pop. You had a lot of great questions. We're gonna be on live next week again. Next week we're talking. It's Inside the Black Box live. And so next week, which is what this was based on originally.
Right, yeah.
And so next week we're going to be talking about green screen and visual effects. So Inside the Black Box is more visual effects. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about keying, live keying. We're also going to show some stuff from a movie that we worked on, and some car shots and some green screens and some, you know, and what it took to kind of pull that stuff back together. So that's going to be our little focus for next week at 6 o'clock.
Fascinating.
And we're having fun every.
You're gonna do a green screen live?
Yep.
Light it, shoot it, look through the cameras.
Yep.
I want to see the noodles that go in and out.
We're gonna
conduit. I want a base pasta dish. I want a base noodles so I can have a starting point.
You know, that's on dvgarage.com.
Is it?
Yep. There's a little tutorial
how about that?
like, here's how to make noodles.
Because I look at it and I'm like, ooh, I like noodles, but.
So we're going to talk about noodling next week. We're going to, you know, it's actually going to be a pasta show. It's going to be a visual effects pasta show talking about noodles. It's very exciting.
Yummy.
Yes. So, but that's coming up next week, so definitely tune in for that. And otherwise, how is the Zoom H1N? And I don't know. I think if that's the older one, it's great. It's just older and it has a couple less tools. H4N is the one we use. I think that's it. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to stop for just a second.
Any other questions, or we keep it open?
I think we're done. Okay. So thank you so much for tuning in to Gear Media Tech Live. And we're going to sign off and go into the after show. If you're still here, we're going to go into an after show and talk about the show in just a second.